You're listening to or watching Desert Planet Picks, and I'm about to ask a very special guest which 8 items he would take with him if he was about to be marooned on a desert planet. Hi, I'm JR, and I am with Dr. Robert of the Blow Monkeys. Dr. Robert, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Well, I'm okay. You're about to be slightly less okay because you have been a very naughty boy and you're about to be banished to an alien world. And I can even tell you what it is that you've done that's such a bad thing to do. You've written a song for an ex-Spice Girl. Now, this may have been years ago and this may be a brilliant song, but oh my God, that is such a transgression. I'm sending you off to a desert planet. I hope you're looking forward to being there. I'm going to find out what the 8 items that you're going to take with you are going to be. And I'm going to start with a really easy and really obvious one. What, Dr. Robert, is going to be your music choice? A record or even the whole output of an artist or maybe even just a song? But what's your music choice going to be?
The best of the Spice Girls, I think, we'll start off with. So that I can, because for my penance. I never actually wrote a song for a Spice Girl. I wrote a song that was given to a Spice Girl.
Oh, is that what it was?
It was a co-write with a friend of mine called Marius de Vries,
who's just been involved with a Best Picture winning movie.
Marius now lives surrounded by gongs and medals that he keeps winning, which he's very happy, and I'm very pleased for him. But he started off playing with us. I have to remind him. I gave him his first break in showbiz. And so that was something that we just wrote really quickly, and he was moving in those circles, so they got to her. I never know what you never know where these things lead.
Before you move on, though, I'll just tell you a very brief story about that song. My brother was working as a music rep at the time, and he gave me a copy of the CD single a couple of weeks before it came out, and he just said, "I know this is a Spice Girl, but listen to it. You might actually like this." And I listened to it, and not only did I like it a lot, but I also thought, that sounds a bit like Dr. Robert of the Blow Monkeys, you know? And then I was a bit surprised a couple of weeks later when it came out to find out that, yes, you had indeed co-written it. So I spotted it even before I knew. Yeah.
Well, fair play, because I don't know where the DNA is hidden in there somewhere, but it's deep in the groove somewhere, but yeah.
It's there, I think. Anyway, your music choice, sorry.
Okay, well, we're going back here to something you mentioned before, but if I had to take one record, one single, this would be, that every time I hear the intro and every time I hear the song, it just grabs me and I can't sit still. It's a song called Theme from Mad Flies by a band called The Laughing Clowns.
Oh, wow, okay.
Australian band. And it's got one of the greatest intros, I think, of all time. It just starts off with the double bass and a bebop kind of drum kit. And then this slightly out of tune brass section comes in. Da, 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 da. And it's just like, it's kind of humorous and serious and funky all at the same time. And then underpinning it all is this guy playing sort of like distant, echoey, punky guitar.
Yeah.
And so it's just got the most extraordinary chord changes in it as well. It takes such unexpected oblique directions. And I still, although I first heard it maybe 40 years ago, I'm still surprised by it when I hear it. It still sounds so vital. It's not a great production. It's just sounds like it was recorded in a day, which probably was. It's just, for me, one of the all-time great records.
Yeah.
I was going to say songs, but it's not. It's a great record. It just sounds like anarchy.
I know what you mean, because sometimes it's that version of that song that band recorded on that day that's special, rather than necessarily just the song itself. Sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, that takes you back to the old way of recording, when you would record a performance rather than construct a song. So and I love that, and I miss that sometimes.
Yeah, because famously, you've said, famously, I'm sure I've read this, you've said that however many times you've recorded Man from Russia, you've never quite caught what you think it is about that song.
No, we never got. I didn't like the recorded version on Limping because we changed the beat and it didn't really work for me. It started off as a sort of drone, almost more undergroundish thing when we very first did a demo of it way back in sort of '81.
Right, right.
And that's sometimes when we occasionally play it live is what I'm trying to get back to. But weirdly enough, it needs our first ever drummer, Angus Hines, who had to leave the band because he was too good looking. It needs him because it needs to. He played just behind the beat,
Right,
in the same way that Oasis for me were a better band. And I say this being a friend of Alan White, who joined them, because Alan drummed for me. In fact, he drummed for me while he got the call from Oasis to join them. But that first drummer, is it Tony McCowell?
I can't remember, but yeah,
really,
sure,
again, played behind the beat. When you hear those very early Oasis things like Supersonic, they sound slightly druggy. They sound slightly woozy, and it's obviously recorded all as one, and then the vocals done on top. And then, of course, you get a proper drummer, and he's great, and it sounds fantastic, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
So there's something about the performance in those records. It's something that the Blow Monkeys are not particularly suited to that style of recording. Mick and Ned in particular prefer to take their time and go home and think about their bits. But I love that. So I got to say, when I played bass with Weller, we did a lot of that during that period of Wildwood and Stanley Road. I think I was there because I was always hanging around the studio, and it would be live takes with Paul. It was a period where, and you pretty much Changing Man is live. I think we might even include the vocal. And because it's and so you're never going to better that if you capture that. Whether or not that's what people want to hear these days, I don't know. People are so used to hearing other forms. But I love that.
Fashions change, but underneath it all, there are always going to be... there are enough people on this planet that there's always going to be somebody who wants to hear one thing rather than another, right?
Well, I think we're always going to respond to the human touch.
Yeah, sure.
I go back to those Bolan things that I love. I mean, I've talked to Tony Visconti, and he told me that, when they were doing things like Telegram Sam or Metal Group, he would record everything except the lead vocal at once and keep that guitar that Mark Bolan was playing while he was trying to show the band how the song went. Yeah, I love that Dylan thing about Eric Clapton, who I'm not a fan of particularly, but went in and said he thought Dylan was showing him the song, but in fact he was recording the song. Right. In other words, you get someone, you get in there, you record it before self-consciousness kicks in, and you know that you have the right ingredients in the room to do that. Well, that's hard to beat with anything, with any. I'm not saying that you can't make great records with computers and machines, especially if these days you can distress them and have fun. It's all, but I do love that.
Yeah,
that magic that happens.
I've always been much more of a fan of very organic, human sounding records there, but I think with a lot of things, a little bit of everything often sometimes can be.
I think keeping it fresh. I mean, I work with a guy called Adam Mosley who worked with Prince a lot, and he would say Prince would just come in and quickly program a Linn drum, very simple, the Kiss or whatever it was, Alphabet Street or one of those things around that time, and then just play everything on top of it real quick, and keep it sparse, and then things like When Doves Cry, not even having a bass on it. So you can still jam with the drum machine is what I'm getting at. I mean, that's it's the attitude you bring to it.
For sure.
And recognizing when that magic's in the room, recognizing that it's time to stop.
Yes.
Being brave enough to do that. Yeah.
Too true. Right, we had better move along, otherwise we're never going to get through all of these.
What was the question?
No, I like it. I love it when things overrun, but I'm aware that I'm also taking up your day, so I don't want to keep you too long.
Well, mostly you're taking up the time of these poor guys that are going to have to listen to this, but never mind.
I'm sure they'll enjoy it.
All right.
The next selection. What meal are you going to take with you to your desert planet?
Oh, God. I'm going to go... I'm in a family of foodies. My son, my wife, my daughter, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant cooks. I, on the other hand, come from slightly less of a culinary background. My grandmother, you know how there's this saying about if your grandmother doesn't recognize it as food, then don't eat it. Well, in that case, I would be on a diet of Jaffa cakes, because that's what basically my grandmother recognizes. She lived in Edinburgh. She wasn't big into that. But when I did used to go and stay with her every summer in Edinburgh, when I was a kid, we'd go to Princess Street and we would go into Littlewoods, and we'd go down to the food hall in Princess Street, and we would have toad in the hole with mashed potatoes and peas. Now, I would probably have the vegan option now these days, but toad in the hole with gravy and mashed potatoes and peas was heaven for me, because it was eating out as well in this extraordinary place. And you walk out afterwards onto Princess Street and there's a piper standing there and there's a castle. You know, it's a volcanic, it's like a film set, Edinburgh, especially in summer. Yeah. And I used to stand next to that piper after I'd had this meal and listen to the bagpipes are extraordinary because it's not the tune, it's all the overtones that are going on. It's all the droning. It's like, it's very emotive. So still, even now, talking about it, I get this feeling. I would have been 8 or 9, you know, and I used to go maybe 5 or 6 summers in a row. So my connection to that meal is more emotional than to do with taste, although I did love it.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Right, since I've got you talking about food, what drink are you going to take with you?
Dandelion and burdock in a Corona bottle. Because I used to, my best friend, Grantley Basham, who I've sung about.
Oh, I know, yes. On Realms of Gold.
He was my, well, I actually met him for the first time in 40 odd years when we played in King's Lynn about 3 years ago at the King's Lynn Festival. And he was just the same. And my wife was totally taken with him. Lovely, lovely man. But he was like the guy in Kes. You know, he was a nature boy. And I lived in King's Lynn, and we would go out to the fens fishing. And I mean, I was a wimp. If I caught anything, I'd get him to take it off the hook and all that. But I just loved being with him and going into these magical places on our bikes. And one of the most exciting things would be to stop off at this little shop in a village and get a bag of crisps and a bottle of Corona, dandelion and burdock. It felt illicit and fun, and it's a magical taste. I don't know if they still do that. I mean, it's sugar, it's just sugar water, but I loved it at the time, and it sounded, exotic.
Yeah. It sounded sort of exotic, but in a very sort of rustic kind of a way. So
there's probably a word for that, rustic, exotic. There's probably a word for that somewhere.
Yeah, probably. Right, let us move along. I'm going to ask you next, what film are you going to take to the desert planet? This will be the last film you'll ever see, and you'll see it 1,000,000 times. Well, probably the film that always sticks with me is Walkabout by Nicholas Roeg. Oh, yeah.
You know it? It's got Jenny Agutter in it, and I saw it, funnily enough, it was on the TV. I think it was on BBC. The week before I moved to Australia. So I went through this very odd period where in 1977, in March 1977, I moved from King's Lynn, where I'd lived for 10 years in Norfolk, to Sydney in Australia. My father died. Lots of things went on. Me and my mum went to live in Sydney where my sister lived. But it was like going from black and white to colour, because King's Lynn in the 70s was it had a reputation as being violent. It was a London overflow town, although it had a cool music scene because it was on the fringes of the Northern Soul thing, and it had a record shop called the Soul Bowl. You know, I spent a lot of time on the run there, hiding from various people and gangs and all that. I found solace in sport. I got in every team I could get. I hated school. So by going from there to there, just before I left there, the week that we left, they showed Walkabout on the television. And that was like, oh my God, am I going there?
Yeah.
Really? Am I going to this place? Because Walkabout is so good at capturing urban Australia. And then where, Sydney, Melbourne, those cities on the East Coast, where you ostensibly, they're quite Anglophile, although Americanized as well in Sydney's case. But then you step outside of that into the outback, as they call it, and you know that you're the other side of the world. You are in another universe.
Wow.
And so that film perfectly exemplified that the weirdness of Australia, the otherness, the sound, the colours, the sound of the landscape. I thought it was beautifully done, and it flipped me because I thought, oh God, I'm going somewhere. But what really pissed me off was that no bands ever came to Kings Lynn. Right? No bands. I think Wizard had played the Corn Exchange once in '73. I didn't go. But there was our local gig was called West Runcton Pavilion. That was the closest one there was. And in March '77, I think it was March or April, poster went up, T-Rex and the Damned, West Runcton Pavilion. So T-Rex and the Damned, who I'd already bought New Rose, that was because they were first out of the blocks. They made the first record, and I love that record. New Rose by the Damned is one of those that it's a very close run for that Laughing Clowns one. I'm not a Damned fan, but that record is fantastic. So I'm going to live in Australia, and here's my favourite band of all time, and a band that just turned me on. And I've just gotten to the point where a lot of people of my age, at that age, I'm going to be in a band now. I bought into that. Here's 3 chords. Now go away and form a band. You know that famous thing on Sniffing Glue. So I thought I was being taken away to the other side of the world, and then I see this film, and I think, oh my God, this is such a weird. Until I saw the Saints, and I saw like Boys Next Door, who was Nick Cave's first band, and all that. And I think we're in Australia, and then it changes everything. But anyway, Walkabout, because it's so resonant for me.
Yeah. Well, when you got to Australia, did the picture that Walkabout painted of Australia, was that what you found?
No, not initially, because I spent the first few years in Sydney, in the inner city. I didn't go to school I was at school age, but I took 18 months off because I was in a kind of weird hole, and I wasn't sure that I ever wanted to go back to school anyway. I didn't. So I tried to get jobs, and I started learning guitar. My sister had left a guitar lying about in the flat that we were living with her for a little while. And
this is a question.
Eagles Made Easy songbook.
Oh, right.
I remember that she came home one day, and my first time, I just took to it. So by the time they came home, I was playing, I don't know, Take It Easy, or, Lying Eyes, or Desperado. I had it all down. It was made easy, mind you. So I was off and running. I was just totally taken by that. But I was living in the city, and then we moved to the North Shore. So I was traveling in the harbour, which is the most amazing place. You're in a harbour, and there's dolphins swimming alongside you, and it's just. I come from Kings Lynn. This is what the fuck is going on. So it wasn't until I started traveling a little bit later, on my way out, that I started to see that side of Australia, because I went up. Travelled up and ended up in Darwin. Right. And lived in Darwin for 9 months. But on the way there, I'd lived in this little village called Corumba in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and I'd been into the Mount Isa, and I'd seen that Walkabout side of Australia by then.
Yeah, sure.
Amazing experience, because it stayed with me. I love Australia. I got problems with some of the things there, but I love the land and
I think the whole of the civilized world is having problems with politics at the moment, so we'll leave that for another time. Okay, then. Oh, this is a question designed to sort of dredge up memories or something, really, but we seem to be doing that already anyway, and that's the idea of the podcast, so I'm not complaining. But what if you only could take one photograph? What photo would you take?
I have a photo of myself standing next to my dad in the back garden of our house in Kings Lynn. And this would have been 1970, because I've got a very newly acquired Chelsea kit on.
Right.
And my world was turned around by the 1970 FA Cup final, which was Chelsea versus Leeds. And it was really David and Goliath. And there were 2 games. There was one at Wembley where it was 2-2. Leeds were all over Chelsea, but this is the first game I can remember watching and deciding there and then that guy Charlie Cook, who plays for Chelsea, is my hero, and that team is my team. and I loved that kit. And there was something glamorous and stylish. And Leeds were full of guys that wanted to kill them, like Jack Charlton and Norman Hunter. Although we had our fair share as well, Chopper Harris and McCready. I could still name all of them. And then I was totally hooked, and it was 2-2. And then there was a replay that Wednesday at Old Trafford. And by this, I'm 9. So I'm totally interested. In that week, that transformed my life. And I watched Chelsea win, and I can't believe it. And from this point, I'm totally hooked. So years later, fast forward, I moved to London, 1981. Chelsea are in the second division. I go to see Chelsea versus Rotherham, I think, where there's 12,000 people there, and Chelsea need to win in order to stay in the second division. So that's how bad it got, But I'm not a fair weather fan. I've been there since that time. And that picture is very, important to me because it's my dad. It's a moment of awakening for me because I escaped into sport as a kid because I hated school. Because I did that thing, at school where I failed. What they had was the 11 plus, which meant I failed because I was so shit at maths. I was good at English, but I was shit at maths, which meant that you would go to the secondary modern school. And I wanted to go to secondary modern school because that's where all my friends went. But my mum and dad didn't want me to go there because they were working class, but they wanted better for me, blah, blah, blah. So they sent me to some little broken down boarding school where I came home every weekend in Norwich, ostensibly to have a second shot with the 13 plus. So I could get into which I did. I passed the 13 plus, God knows how. So I got into the grammar school. But it's all, it's all those memories coming back about that time. So that photo, which I think I might have put up on social media at one point somewhere, but I'll dig it out again. That photo.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to whisper something now. Don't let anybody know. Rotherham is my birth town, and I have a Rotherham United kit.
Right.
So,
well, I've never met anybody, A, who owns up to being born in Rotherham, and B, who's got a kit. And that's cool. That's really good. It's nice to know that. I don't know what the kit is. What colour is the kit?
It's basically the Arsenal kit. Because if you remember way back when the new teams that came up would just wear the kits of teams that already existed. So I have a feeling that when Rotherham United were formed, they just used to play in Arsenal kits until they redesigned it for themselves, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway. We're not here to talk about my football memories, so let us...
I'm interested in Rotherham. What league are they in now, by the way?
They're in... Are you laughing at me?
No, I mean, I'm genuinely... I don't know.
They're at top of Division 1, so they're third division down.
Division 2.
Yes, exactly.
No, it used to be Division
3 way back when we were kids. Division 3, then it became Division 2, and now it's Division 1. It's the third division, though. But they're currently top.
All right, good. On the way up.
Yeah, well, yeah, but then they'll come in the bottom 3 next year. So this is what they do. They win it, they go back down. They go up, they go down. They're one of those teams.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving along, I'm going to ask you, what book are you going to take to your desert planet? This is the point at which you admit to...
You sent me these questions, and I deliberately didn't I didn't want to think about it because, So my first thing comes into my mind is a book called The Road Less Travelled by a writer called Dr. Scott Peck, I believe his name.
Okay, yeah.
It's written, I think it was written in about 1978. He was a psychoanalyst.
Right.
But who was exploring some of those early ideas, like this kind of, like these guys that are around like Eckhart Tolle and people like that, the power of now and all these things. Okay, it's quite easy to take the piss out of them because a lot of it is airport kind of light, Buddhist light stuff. But this one in particular, The Road Less Travelled, which is a paraphrase of a Robert Frost poem.
Yeah, yeah.
I read this at a very important kind of time when I just had kids, and it seemed to make an awful lot of sense to me because it's like a cross between psychoanalysis and spirituality, but there's also there's also in the latter half of it, it puts some people off. There's a kind of religious thing, but without being of any particular team. It's other things that I would have had nothing to do with as a, in my earlier years. I would have been too cynical or too cool to have wanted to go there. And he also drops a lot of names in there and leads you onto other paths, which I love that. So it's quite hard to summarize exactly what this book is about, because it's more than a self-help book, and it's like a philosophy, but it encompasses all those things like psychoanalysis and religion and spirituality. And so it's something that I still dig into occasionally. It's one of those that you can go back to.
My feeling about that kind of thing is it doesn't have to be scientifically provably accurate, but if it brings something out of you, the person reading it or experiencing it, that allows you to sort of focus or put positive energy into a better place and make yourself a happier or more productive person because of it, then it's done its job. So it doesn't need to be, a particular religion or a particular science or whatever. It just needs to work for you as a human being. And if something's connected between the author and the person reading it, then that's the important thing. And that's the job of the book done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting, this book is a very early kind of example of the coming together of science and spirituality, if you like. He talks about the rewiring of kind of neurological pathways through new experiences and blah. So some of these places where science now has come to that coalesce with what you might call spirituality, for want of a better word. So, I mean, listen, we're in a world right now where it seems to me that it's being run by psychopaths.
Yes, no question.
I mean, in the medical sense, Trump, Putin, Boris Johnson, these kind of figures are all of a type in terms of like psychologically. And I think that this is, one of our great ways out of this. One of our only hopes, really. I mean, obviously, we're faced by imminent ecological crisis, and if we don't wake up to that, you can forget it all. But one of the growth areas is in mental health, as they call it. So, and it's something that we wouldn't have talked about as youngsters. We would have said, Mars, she's bad with her nerves today, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
that's not the language of my kids. My kids are far more au fait with that. They're far more at ease with that.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a good thing. And so, it's the kind of thing that we need to start teaching kids at school. If it's meditation or whatever it is, it's the idea that you're not just trapped in your current thought processes, that these are conditioned, these have been handed down to you from your parents. It's not their fault or from society.
Yeah.
There is a way out of this, and therefore we don't just have to keep repeating the same mistakes and end up where we are now, which is on the brink of annihilation, because we've allowed these fuckers to get to the top. Our systems reward those kind of people. You only need to look at the popular films at the moment. She's not saying, these superheroes. It's all the idea that that salvation comes through one person or one, So I think that kind of with the re-education from a very early age about how it is that we think about the world and our place in the world.
In a couple of generations' time, they're going to look back on what we went through now, and they're going to laugh as if it was some kind of big joke, because this is not the way the world should be, is it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, the way we look back at certain things, I think they'll look back at the way we treat animals, for instance.
Yeah.
In terms of industrial kind of food production. And say, how could they do that? How could they do that? How did they not understand? So again, that's well, there are a million reasons for that. I live in Spain, where you wouldn't want to be a pig. I mean, let's be honest, in Spain, and that's based, that's a macho thing. It's also a religious thing, Christianity. Animals don't have souls. you know,
Oh, it's
Catholicism,
strange. Mm.
you know, all that stuff. So, you know, we're having to, you know, anyway, where were we? Books. So that kind of thing, you know,
Yeah.
that was a beginning of a kind of awakening for me that led me on another path, in terms of, you know, reading. I mean, there was one thing happened to me very, very young, if I can digress.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Was that when I was about 10 or 11, the Transcendental Meditation team, whatever you call them, traveling circus, came to town, and that was in King's Lynn. So in King's Lynn, 1972. And of course, I've got two elder sisters, 10 years older than me, and my mum, who was quite hip to things, who had been through the whole Beatles thing. So they knew all about Transcendental Meditation, the Maharishi, which is what these guys were. So they go along to it, and I say as a little kid, oh, can I come? Can I come? You know,
Yeah.
okay, so I went along. So I'm 12 years old, and they give me a mantra, and they do that thing, and I did the kind of meditation. And I remember walking out of there thinking that I could fly. And I remember thinking, and then I didn't do it for 40 years, you know. But I did know there was something that was triggered that said, oh, you know, there is a way of, you know, I used everything else in the meantime, drugs, alcohol, everything going, fame, in order to try and get there. But there are other ways, you know. So if I'd have carried on, I wasn't ready to carry on. But the fact that I was given a little insight as a kid into another place that you could be, another way of calming and stilling the chattering mind. I was, you know, I always had it in my back pocket that you could go back there because I remember that feeling. Well, I think that every child and everybody should have that experience. It doesn't need to be transcendental meditation, whatever it is, but they should be teaching this, you know, kind of.
Yeah.
I think this should be on the curriculum.
I think actually these days it's becoming more and more.
They call it mindfulness now, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. But it's becoming more and more acceptable and ordinary and just part of people's armory these days, isn't it? Which is a good thing, obviously.
Yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed of in therapy or any of that stuff. It used to be, you know, easily mocked and looked down upon, but this is just the same as having something physically wrong. In fact, even as important, because we are bombarded. We are bombarded with propaganda, and I'm just talking about advertising. I'm just talking about capitalist wet dream, which is all ultimately a lie. I mean, I don't know if you know the comedian Bill Hicks, but he was onto this. His thing about advertising, the things that he was saying about advertising executives way back then, early 90s.
Yeah.
Spot on, because it's a sickness and it's a lie. And so now we have comparison culture where you're going to constantly compare yourself to your friends or whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. And it's leading us, it's a hairy one. It's something that I feel really strongly about, that we need to change.
Do you think, okay, to sort of stay on a tangent slightly, but to bring it back to music in your career, do you think the fact that you've changed, you went from the Blow Monkeys to being a solo artist and then the Blow Monkeys reformed, do you think the fact that you've not just been on a steady path, but there's been changes in your path, steps in your path, do you think that's helped you stay calm, stay grounded, stay centered?
I haven't always been calm and grounded and centered.
Well, no.
I think there's been lots of periods where I haven't been. If people closest to me would tell you that.
Sure, so, fair enough.
I think the thing that's kept me, not necessarily the changes, but the music itself, the physical act of actually getting up in the morning and playing guitar, which I do every day, just as a kind of a nice way to start the day. It releases whatever it is, dopamine. I don't know what it does, but it's a nice feeling. That's the function of the music for me. Right. And then we get around to thinking about, oh, maybe that's just, maybe that's something there. Maybe we can. So that's. But yeah, I mean, I've tried to not stick. I've tried to surprise myself. I always took that thing about just wading into the water that Bowie said once about just beyond where you feel comfortable. Well, that's where you should be.
Yeah.
If you're going to be creative. There's no point in and of course I have tried to repeat myself, and in order to have another hit when we're in the Blow Monkeys, the pressures of that to repeat it. And they've always been the worst songs. They've always been the ones that I've wished I never did. And when I look back now, I see that, if we'd have had, we probably moved too fast for our audience.
I think so, yeah.
From something like Animal Magic to Springtime for the World is really only 3 years or 4 years. And that's, most bands wouldn't have released anything and then released another one like Animal Magic 4 years later.
Yeah.
Coldplay, bands like that. They know how to do that. Nowadays, Svengali manager would say, "Hey, slow down. You're ostracizing this great big worldwide audience that you've just got. What you need to do is another dig in your scene." But that's probably the way to have gone. But I tell you what, I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I wouldn't be. I'm not capable of doing it, because that's not enough for me. So what?
Yeah.
I'm not pretending that I don't like success and money and fame and blah blah blah. But at the same time, that's not really that's ultimately, in truth, not what it is that motivates me. So I wasn't very good at being in the showbiz family.
Right, we'd better move on because we've still got 2 categories to go, and we're well overrunning, but as long as you're happy to continue.
Well, who's making these rules about the time?
Nobody's making the rules about the time, so we'll keep talking for as long as it takes then.
Right.
Okay, if you could only take one TV show with you, what TV show would you take?
Bloody hell, TV show.
You are allowed to say none, I suppose.
I love the Avengers.
Oh, do you? Fair enough.
I loved it. I loved the stylized, surreal. I was, Diana Rigg. I was in love with her. Subliminally, Patrick Suits and his other look, just everything about it. I guess it's because there were things around that time when I would have been 8 or 9, so it was very powerful. It's very other. It was like, ooh. So the Avengers, maybe. Oh, the other thing that really struck me was the TV show of Batman.
Yeah.
Again, I was the right age for that. You would hit Batman would come on, and then I think it was the Monkeys. It was on the same afternoon, on a Saturday afternoon.
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
And that was a magical way, because I love the Monkeys too. I wanted to be Peter Tork.
Well, what you've just basically described is a bunch of TV shows that are basically either kids shows for grown-ups or grown-up shows for kids, but they basically sit in that hinterland, that sort of Peter Pan-ish hinterland between the two. A good place to escape, in other words, I think.
Yeah, good. Slightly scary, slightly for a kid, slightly otherworldly, not necessarily comforting. And also accompanied by great music, all 3 of those.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny. A quick one. I'm in a local bar here in Spain where I go for breakfast. And a guy comes up to me who's a Spanish, who I've known for quite a while. Angel, his name.
Yeah.
And he comes up to me, this is a couple of months ago, and he's very tearful almost. He comes up to me and he says, "I'm really sorry," in Spanish, "to hear about your guitarist." And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm the guitarist in the band." He said, "No, but Mike." And he thinks I'm in the Monkeys, and he thinks that Mike Nesmith is my guitarist who had just died a couple of months ago.
Wow.
I had to laugh. I had not to laugh. I had to I had to say in Spanish, "All this time that you've been thinking I'm in the Monkeys, no, I'm not in the..." Anyway, I digress.
Well, I should, therefore, at this juncture, ask you what the truth is about where the name The Blow Monkeys comes from, because over the years there's been several different stories. But you know what? I think I prefer the mystery of not knowing which one is actually true.
Okay. Well, then I'll tell you.
Well, unless you have a burning desire to get it off your chest, but I don't think you should. So let's ask you instead. This is basically the last category. I'm going to ask you one more question after this. But if you could take one person, and the idea is this is not somebody from your family, but basically a stranger It doesn't necessarily have to be, though. I mean, it's your choice. But the idea is a stranger, somebody alive or dead. If you could just take one person to be your constant companion on this desert planet, who would that person be?
Count Leo Tolstoy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For why?
Well, because I had just finished reading a biography of him, and also because I read the calendar that he wrote every day. He wrote an entry every day.
Sure.
He was a very interesting, well, just put it mildly, his whole life was quite a journey. You know, he's born into aristocracy, he fights in the Crimean War. He later on relinquishes everything, including his whole, his houses and his wealth. And he looks at the so-called peasants who are working on his land, and he wonders, why are they happy and why am I unhappy, and all my intellectual friends. And he realizes that, for them the religion is, they don't believe in the religious thing, but they find comfort in it, and it works for them. And then later on in life, he starts to explore. I think he's one of the very first guys that explores Eastern philosophy and Eastern writings and brings them into the West, the so-called West. He starts exchanging letters with people like Gandhi towards the end of his life.
Right.
And he goes on this extraordinary journey where at the very end of his life, he walks out of his house and his wife and his riches, and he gets on a train and he goes off and he dies in a train station a few hundred miles away. And he takes the trajectory almost of a living saint.
Right.
And so in some ways, he's the most interesting man that I've ever read about. So I guess if you're going to be stuck on this island, he's a good start.
Yeah.
I think he'd have a few interesting things to say.
Absolutely. But here comes the ringer. You can actually take another person with you, because normally on this podcast, not always, but usually, I'll ask people which Doctor Who story they'll take to a desert planet. In your case, instead, I'm going to ask you, which Doctor Who would you take to a desert planet?
Well, that's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah. But you say it.
I'll take my mate Peter Capaldi, because we could sit and play guitar all day, which is what we do anyway.
So, and this obviously is a leading question by way of asking, how did this come about in the first place? What happened to bring you two together?
I'll take Sylvester McCoy. There you go. That's the end of that conversation. Okay. Sorry, what was the question? How did we meet?
Yeah. Basically, how did you start working together as well? How did it all come about?
He comes out. Go back 10 years. I had spotted in a local bar in Spain here, in this valley where I live, where there are 12 villages, a guy that looked remarkably like the guy in the thick of it, sitting in the bar. And I said to Michelle, my wife, I've just spotted a guy that looks remarkably like the guy in the thick of it. And then a mutual friend said, oh yeah, Peter, he comes, he's got a little house in a little village, he comes. This is pre-Doctor Who.
Right, yeah.
So anyway, fast forward a couple of years, the mutual friend introduces us in the bar again and says, Peter, this is Robert. Knowing that Peter's into music and wanting for Peter to play at this guy's party where we just go to, and you just sit around in the garden in the summer. So I brought the guitar along and started doing that. And of course, Peter joined in. And that's how we started talking and met. And we bonded over kind of, well, he's a massive Bolan as well fan. Plays really well. So we just started to play together, and then it evolved from there, really, because we got on really well. We've got so many similar places. Peter's not at all showbiz. He's not acting. Yeah. He's not.
You're both the same in that respect. I
don't think he's very comfortable with the company of actors. If you know what I mean. And I'm not particularly like that myself. With in the showbiz world, I'm not. I would much rather sit and talk to the local farmer here and listen to his story. I'm not really into that. That's why I live here. One of the reasons. Yeah. So anyway, we found out, I think, mutually that we're like that. Although obviously we have a lot of shared signposts and history. Although we're very different. So got on with him really well. Bonded over the music, and so every summer that he would come, and then I'd go and see him when he was in London, and we became good friends. And I was always saying to him, you should make a record. You should go, because I knew that he had this history.
Yeah, he could have made a record like back in the late 70s, early
Yeah,
80s.
he could have. I don't think he felt ready. That's the weird thing. I think that Peter needs to feel that it's right. He won't be
Yeah,
forced into those things. He doesn't need to do it. It needs to come from a place where he felt where he felt comfortable making it with. So I was doing these Monks Road things, and I was recording one up here at Youth Studio, which is up the road here. And Peter came in one day, and Elaine, his wife, said he's got this song, but he's a bit shy about it. And so anyway, she played it to me, and I showed it to the musicians, and we did it that afternoon.
wow.
Mick Talbot, Matt Dayton, Crispin playing drums.
Great drummer.
A great drummer. Oh, fantastic. I love Crispin. He's transformed things for me recently. And I played bass, which I love doing. So we recorded that. And I think from that moment on, it was obvious that we were going to do it. And then COVID comes along, so we couldn't get together to do it. So we started to build. He started to send me lots of demos on GarageBand, and I would sort of like, work on them, start just building up on them and getting them to a place where I could then get Mick in and Crispin and all the time he's writing. He was making that film Suicide Squad, and he was out there in Atlanta, and I know that he was writing lots out there, and they were coming, and the words were fantastic. They were just like, this is real. This guy's a real writer. He's really a great storyteller.
I'd be fascinated to know how much of it is autobiographical and how much of it is kind of fictionalized, because it feels like a really autobiographical record.
Well, it does. I mean, a little bit of Class, for instance.
Who
is it? It's not. He's made it up, but it's somebody we know. We all know. I had that person in my house. I mean,
I said in our review of it.
He's a storyteller. Yeah. He's a storyteller. So I mean, I think I wouldn't be being, turning out of school if I said that. I think he writes a lot about Elaine, his wife, just like I do. I mean, so much of my writing has come through Michelle.
Yeah, sure.
Things that she said, things that she's observed. I watch the world through her eyes sometimes, and so and
she is lovely, Michelle, as well.
Constantly feeding, and you constantly, kind of picking the bones out of other people's conversations. I mean, I feel like sometimes. Well, I know Peter does that. I know he's always got his eyes open, and he's always writing. Most of all, I would say he's a hard worker, because I think we did 3 times as many songs as we recorded as we ended up putting out.
Oh, really?
It was okay with me going, no, I don't think that's going to make the cut, or if I just gently didn't mention that one again. And he's cool with that, because I think it was really important for him to do something that he felt comfortable with, because he's an easy target. When people in that position, thespians, make records, it's often not a very good idea. But Peter is a musician first before he was an actor, and music runs deep in him. It's coming from a different place.
And it does not sound like the kind of record that an actor makes. It sounds like the kind of record that a musician makes. It doesn't sound like a vanity project at all.
Exactly. It wasn't really, exactly. And but he can deliver that actorly thing, like the spoken word things at the beginning of all, that's, I know what he's into, and I know the kind of music that Peter, I mean, he's massive, but Lou Reed, Bowie, that kind of thing. But he doesn't copy that. He's got his very own. He's got that, but that's the roots, what he does. So, which for me was a different world, because I'm not, There's also that there's probably more kind of power chords and synths and guitars and things than normally I would do. So it took me into a place where I wasn't necessarily used to being as well. That kind of Scottish rock thing. There was something in there. There's something, which is great. I love that. It's good fun to do, and I hope we do another one. I'd like to try and. I don't need to persuade him, because I know he wants to do it, a gig at some point. But he's such a busy. You know, he's always writing and producing and stuff. But the music is really in him. But some of the best times we've had is just sitting around playing.
Yeah.
Just sitting around playing is great fun with Peter.
Well, there's that terrific video up on YouTube of the two of you doing The Wild River, which is lovely. Just sitting there playing opposite each other. Fantastic.
Yeah, that was very early on. And he, it just clicked. He asked to do that.
Did he? Right.
And so I was thrilled because I knew that it would attract a bit of attention, but also I just loved playing with him. And I think actually after that he got up on stage with us in a few places. He came up in Glasgow, in his hometown. He said, he said, no, here's a local hero. So it was quite fun to say, here's a local hero. And then he came up at the Albert Hall and played with us as well when we were playing there with Level 42. So, it's an ongoing thing, I think. I hope, anyway.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Anyway, Robert, it has been an honour and a privilege to do this podcast with you. Thank you so much for coming along, letting me know your choices. Got one little dilemma to leave you with before we sign off, and that is this. You're on a desert planet. You've been marooned there. You're not allowed to come home. You've taken all these things with you. And then somebody says to you, we'll let you come home, but all these things that you've taken with you have to stay on the desert planet. And nobody on planet Earth is ever allowed to experience any of these things ever again. And they will all know that you are the reason why they can't. So what do? Do you stay on the desert planet with your choices, or do you come back to Earth with the guilt, knowing that forever again, nobody's ever going to be able to watch Walkabout or listen to the Laughing Clowns, and all because of you? Do you stay or do you come back?
I come back.
Fair enough.
Because life trumps art.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Well, Dr. Robert, thank you so much. I'm going to play out with, I think, the intro from that Laughing Clown song you talked about earlier in the podcast. So I will dig that out, find it, and we will, because you talked about it so beautifully, we'll let people hear a little bit of that for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I hope I didn't rabbit on too much.
Oh, no, the more rabbiting, the better.
Okay, cool.